It is officially noon, so we will start. Welcome everyone to the March Leaders Learning Live webinar. Leaders Learning Live is presented by the SAIL Institute if you haven't already joined one of these before. I'm Marissa McCasty. I'm the Leadership Development Manager for the SAIL Institute. We do leadership development programming for faculty, staff, and students across the system. This webinar series happens every third Thursday of the month at noon, and it is free, so that's a very good opportunity for some free professional development on some topics that we hope you will be able to have some good resources and takeaways, and we'll be hearing from some great experts around recruitment and retention very soon. And just to let you know, we will be recording this webinar, so if you want to take a look at it again or you want to share it with colleagues, feel free to do so. And if at any point this conversation and with these speakers, we want to make it as interactive as possible. So if you have any sort of questions, please place them in the chat, and we will get to them as they come up. And then we'll also save some questions at the end we'll save some space for you to ask any sort of questions at the end. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. So you have come from Recruitment to Retention, a panel discussion around enrollment and retention strategies for at-risk student populations. We have Meylin Andares, who is the Director of Enrollment Management and Student Success at SUNY System Administration. And we have Craig Broccoli, who is the Associate Director of Admissions and New York City-based Regional Representative for Binghamton University. Thank you for being here. And then we have Karen Ferrer-Muniz, Dean of Instructional, Academic Support Services and Retention at Hudson Valley Community College. Welcome, Karen. And Shelitha Williams, she is the Vice President, a CDO for Student and Enrollment Services at Genesee Community College. So welcome, all of you. So before we start, I just wanted to share with the audience some learning outcomes that we hope that you will get from this webinar today, adopting the most effective strategies for recruitment and retention of SUNY students, gaining knowledge about the interdepartmental collaborations needed for retention and to improve student success, and to learn how to navigate in troubling economic times and meeting the students where they are and encouraging inclusive campus cultures. So in order to do that, as we have this conversation with our experts here, we wanted to just share some definitions of recruitment and retention, just kind of to frame the conversation. And so you can take a look at that. I won't read it word for word for you, but just take a look at that, and that's what we're using for today's conversation. I did want to also, Meylin, if you could, for the audience, just give a definition of at-risk student populations, because I think a lot of people have, they have ideas of what that means, but it would be nice if you could define it for this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, there's not a SUNY definition. I know we had talked about this before, but I wanted to talk at risk from a high school perspective and at risk from a college perspective. So an at-risk student in high school is someone who is identified as likely to fail. So that means that they're not going to graduate. And that can mean several factors. That can mean anything from coming from a disadvantaged background to economic, socioeconomic, if they have behavioral issues, learning outcomes. So at risk in high school really is anything that will impact them to finish their high school work and graduate. And when I say at risk, I think a lot of people in my work have always thought, oh, it's low income or first generation. And in today's world, it can mean just a plethora of different things. If they're in foster care, if they come from different backgrounds, if they've been a veteran in the services. So just being very mindful of the different factors that impact our students in high school today, especially it's just a very quickly changing population. Those students will transition into the college environment, and at risk in college is also considered a disadvantage to completely to effectively complete coursework, also delaying graduation. So the concerns and issues they may have in high school can transition for college purposes as well. So that's why we have all these, everything from student success centers and retention recruitment purposes, and work to persist them to college graduation once they get to a campus.
Thank you very much, Meylin. So this question is for everyone here today. You all come from different campuses, institutions, and organizations. So we can start with Craig. I think that would be good. If you could talk a little bit about your successes and challenges around recruitment and retention within your institution.
Sure, yeah, and representing a bigger university in this state system, and we have a lot of applications from all over the world, frankly, but many come from New York, Metro New York City, where I'm based, which ties into some of our bigger recruitment and also, frankly, some of our retention issues. So one of the biggest challenges, and this I think exists for a lot of institutions that are outside of a bigger metro center, is just getting people to see campus, particularly those who might not have access to easy forms of transportation or even virtual access to that. So part of that challenge has caused us, Binghamton, over the years to really build up heavily a regional admissions team, which is frankly part of my role, where we could have a lot more FaceTime interaction with students. And that's slowly starting to see the success curve, not just with students applying, but now also having more candid, real, authentic conversations about the reality of going upstate. Again, more particular to, as Meylin described, at risk, which is a slightly different definition when you look at students entering, say, Binghamton, where they might be entering different access points, but really trying to provide as much face interaction, as much time as we can on the admissions end, where 10 years ago, it was less so the case. Nowadays, we're doing a lot more person-to-person interaction, as well as then also looking at the other front end. How do we get those students to campus? We have admitted student bus trips, of course, but now we're working on having, and we had last year, bus trips for prospective students in the fall to see campus that are paid for by us, so they're free of cost for students and a guest. These are ways that we're trying to shift to at least be more accommodating to giving that firsthand perspective.
Thank you very much. And Shelitha, what successes and challenges do you have on your campus?
Well, Genesee Community College is located in Batavia, New York. We're between Rochester and Buffalo, a very rural environment. And so some of our challenges are similar to what Craig has spoken to regarding getting students here. Where is Batavia? How far are you from New York City? Where's the big city, and where are the activities? We don't have a lot of activities as it relates to what students can engage in the surrounding community. We certainly have built up some activities, but it is difficult to sell. A very rural, we have a dairy farm across the street from us. We have corn and cabbage in this area. And so how do we entice students to this very different experience for many of them? And so that has been a challenge. Our successes have been around international student retention, actually. So we have worked with some international agencies to have a population of about 130 students that we support here at GCC. One of the advantages is as a community college, we do have a residential program, and so we are able to offer housing for international students, some of whom do utilize housing. Some are athletes, but some are not. And so that is how we've been able to thus far support our student populations in this very rural environment.
Thank you. Karen?
So at Hudson Valley Community College, we're 10 minutes away from Albany, from the capital region. We're right in the midst of that area. We have a very unique situation in which every single student is a commuter. So we have students who are most likely, more than 70% of them, working regardless of their age and studying at the same time. So we are not only recruiting traditional high school students, which we do have actually 75%, but there's still traditional high school students who are based on their economic history in their families that work at the same time, that have been working actually since high school. And so some of the things that we as an institution are facing is having traditional and non-traditional students juggling not only working full-time, but also studying full-time, and recruiting them from traditional areas at the same time, although we do have a population of non-traditional, and most likely those are, we'll probably talk more about that later on. A lot of people tend to forget about the single parents, both genders, the VA students, and also the children, the adult children who are still supporting their families and their parents who are immigrants. And so those are sort of a combination of the things that we deal with and that we have to not only keep in mind from the point of recruitment, but also keep in mind from the point of retention. So I tend to actually mix both together for the nature of my job. I tend to mix the recruitment, it's part of securing and keeping intact from the beginning to the end. So when I tend to mix both concepts as well. So I'll be talking about it, but I'll be going back and forth because I think recruitment and retention go all the way together. Your profile and the profile of the student that you have, it's based on who you're looking for or who you find. And we'll talk more about that, but in a nutshell, that's sort of the summary of what I can provide you in terms of challenges and what we face.
Thank you. Yes, they're very interrelated. And Meylin?
I wanted to add, for me, I'm in an interesting position because I work for all of system. And for me, I think some of the biggest challenges I've seen is students being very conscious about money and the value of a college education and going more the route for academic workforce. So for example, at SUNY, you know, across the state, it's all the educational opportunity centers, right? So there are more work programs like medical billing assistant and technicians and OSHA trainings. A lot of students, for either financial reasons or maybe because they may not feel that they're ready to go to a traditional college experience, may choose a different route. So that's sort of the interesting for us because we want them to look at the options they have completely upfront and know, because most of them will come back after a year or two and want to pursue a 2-year or 4-year college degree at SUNY. And I think that's a challenge, is finding the right fit. Like Karen said, students nowadays have several interests and they may not want to buckle down on one. So our goal is really finding a place that fits them academically, emotionally, socially, and is going to provide the right support services for them to not only allow them to persist, but to graduate successfully. And I think it's something we struggle in. My role is trying to find campuses with 64 campuses, finding the right student for each goal. And it's, you know, in partnerships that we'll discuss later on, but understanding the student needs. Successes, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of students, I'll talk about that later too, in community engagement, going out into the community, churches, after school programs, and really promoting the value of SUNY for families. If families encourage their students to go away, they most likely will persist at that institution as well.
Great, thank you. And now that we've talked about successes and challenges, Shelitha, what are some strategies outside of traditional recruitment practices that you have been able to come up with to help your campus?
Well, as a community college, in the past, we haven't necessarily recruited per se. We opened our doors, open enrollment, and students just arrived. We're in a different state right now with the decline in high school graduation and just the general demographic. We are recruiting. We are intentional. We are managing territory.
Good, I'm on my webinar.
Very different than we have in the past.
I'm muted.
And so as a community college, that in itself is a significant change for our staff and the way in which we are seeking students to be enrolled at a community college. Craig spoke to briefly the idea of a regional recruiter. Here at GCC, we too hired a regional recruiter. As a community college, we have someone who is working out of the New York City region based on the demographics of having higher high school graduation rates in that area. And so we are now seeking locations where we can recruit students to come to the community college to actually live and learn, because we also have the residence halls here. And many community colleges are now considering residential programs if they hadn't had them established in the past. Some other things that we've done is we're now partnering on at an admissions level. So there are many transfer programs between 4-year and 2-year community colleges, but we are now partnering with some of the 4-year institutions on the admissions level. So if a student applies for a 4-year institution and for whatever reason are not accepted into those programs, we are entering in partnerships where that student is referred to GCC. We manage their curriculum, encourage them, support them, monitor them, and then transfer them back with 100% acceptance into that 4-year institution. This is something very new that we've started to do, but we've seen some successes. We have a nursing program. Nurses are now required to have a 4-year degree, and so they start with us in the nursing program, and we have a seamless transfer into Brockport. Or perhaps there are other partnerships we have where someone is maybe not accepted into Bus State, and they're referred to GCC and then referred back for that 4-year degree. So we really have to be creative in how we're engaging students. I mentioned that we're in a rural area. We too have a bus program where we invite students to experience what it's like in this area. What is it like to be in this rural area without 24-hour transportation, so that as we onboard the student, it is not a shock to them that I can't just go downtown. I can't just get a train or a bus because there are limited services in this rural area. So we're doing all we can to be creative in how we recruit. Certainly this has been changed by the decline in demographics as well as high school graduations, but we're also really putting a lot of emphasis on how we retain students. What I will tell anyone at this time is that our retention is our recruitment. How we retain our continuing students is very important. And another effort that we have implemented here at Genesee is the Student Success Center. And so this is an operation which is comprehensive, including 5 functional areas, those key areas that students usually get caught up in. So advisement, admissions, financial aid, student accounts, records and registration. But the students are assigned a coach, and that coach is assigned to a cohort that they are responsible for engaging, building a rapport and relationship, creating relationships with faculty who can support these students. And so this is our effort to keep our students, to retain. Again, that's how we're recruiting. We're retaining them, and so we're not losing as many students from the fall to the spring semester.
That's a great mentality. Thank you. And Craig, I know you mentioned a few different things, but if you could expand on the types of support services and resources that you identify for students who are at risk.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I'll try to start still with the recruitment side in the beginning, because I think that's where you start to see where the at-risk students are, and partially, again, with this omnipresent role of having multiple regional recruiters here that are more always out there. We try to at least identify, especially high school by high school, and this may be the easiest way to do this, or community-based organization by community-based organization, that when engaging with students, we have to first start with having multiple points of access, and we've shifted to yes, email works, but here's a number to text. And that the population of students that have been using a text feature to engage with a counselor has skyrocketed, which is a great thing because these are students who actually need the extra help, not just to demonstrate their interest, which is not what we're tracking there, but more so, can we get you to the next level, which is applying. Even if we know that student might be a good transfer student down the line, did we get them through the process where they got to the next step? That's part of it. Now, once we identify students who are then are admitted and enrolling and therefore are coming to Binghamton, it's of course the retention part that kicks into gear. You know, at a big campus, we're going to have multiple different sort of groupings. We're in our EOP, Education Opportunity Program, students who are getting a ton of resources already identified through that program. There's another swath of students that are considered coming from low-income backgrounds, you know, Pell eligible, first generation that fits a TRIO definition, which is about a third of our student population. So they're getting extra support through TRIO. New this year, we actually went a step further and created, it's called the Be First initiative, similar as to what was just mentioned in terms of another group of contact of students. We're working now, particularly with first generation college students, which many will fall into this at-risk category now at Binghamton, to connect them with a mentor that's also a faculty or staff or an alum that is also identifies as a first generation former college going student. And that's their direct point of contact. And especially, I mean, in times like these where there's a lot up in the air, now all of our students are virtual, that network has really started to flex its muscle and support because they host their own Zoom meetings, how to engage with faculty when something comes up like this, how do you even advocate for yourself in a virtual platform. That subgroup is doing a whole lot of work to help ease even transitions like this, where when you talk about an at-risk population, this is when they're most at risk, when they don't have the support there. So these subgroups are becoming incredibly important. With that being said, I mean, I still think one of the biggest things that we all need to work on are partnerships in general. The number of partnerships we now have with community-based organizations, yes, it helps on recruitment end and getting students interested, but it's massively important when you work with their success coaches on how to keep them in those students in the right spot. And working with the success coach, we don't have the resources to always jump in and help a student when we might notice that they're academically struggling. Their success coach, and we have an ongoing list of those success coaches do, and keeping in touch both with admissions and our residential life staff has been helpful there.
Very good, thank you. And Shelitha, what types of supports and services do you all identify for at-risk students?
As previously mentioned, we do utilize the student success coaches in this cohort-based model. We do have an established EOP program, which has new leadership in order to be more intentional about engaging students and the resources that are provided to them. Here at GCC, I'm also the Chief Diversity Officer, and one of my approaches has been to be intentional about how the staff reflects the students that we are serving, particularly the at-risk student population. And so doing very subtle things, but I believe that they've had great impact. Our student activities is no longer referenced as such, but it is now student engagement and inclusion. And so it's about intentionally engaging our diverse population, our at-risk population, and being very strategic about how we support those student populations instead of doing things the way we've always done them. And so just a simple changing of the name and being intentional about the leadership for that space has been one of the efforts. We have combined the co-curricular programming student engagement activities with our athletic program. And so we have one person who's providing leadership for the two and trying to, again, retain our students and to ensure that they're having a positive experience here at GCC.
Great, thank you. And I know that there's been some questions that have come through the chat here. I think that we can take a couple of those. I know that some of them we are going to address, so hang tight. But I'd like to just ask Meylin and Karen, Meylin and Craig, what are some innovative partnerships and projects that you work on that help with recruitment and retention on your campus or within your organization?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to mention I worked at UAlbany for 10 years in admissions on the ground before coming to System. So I worked very closely with Craig. So I took this approach more looking at the community-based groups and organizations in New York City, which are several. So some of the partnerships that we've created, I came on board and I really wanted to create an opportunity for students to be excited and be happy that they chose SUNY to pursue their college education. So for the last 4 years, probably on hold this year because of everything going on, but I've hosted a SUNY senior send-off, and that's something that Craig has participated as far as GCC reps and so on, in which we have students from several CBOs come together and we give them resources and tools to be successful throughout the summer as well as the first year in college. And those programs have really helped us keep track of the students going away. Second, the other partnerships is with the alumni retention specialists. So many community-based organizations agree with us that retention is key. So they've hired people as alumni retention folks to follow their students on campuses. So there are liaisons. So students that struggle academically, need help, don't know what's happening, they will approach that student who then comes to us for campus folks and assistance. So NY Gear Up. So NY Gear Up is a program that targets the whole state. And then I really pursued having programs at 2 and 4 year schools. So I did have one at GCC as well as Genesee. I try to promote 2-year and 4-year schools the same, just because our students have so many different opportunities and I don't think they're fully well versed. And lastly, the partnerships we really have a lot is with families. As someone who's not a parent myself, I really have come to appreciate the impact and the influence parents have on decision making when it comes to their children. So for me, engaging with parent-teacher associations, after-school programs, families, if they were not fully well versed completely about what SUNY has to offer, and to educate them, especially if they didn't go to college or have the going away experience, is an opportunity for us to re-engage that population. And many of our parents actually end up going back to school to one of our SUNY campuses after their child has gone off to school as well. So the partnerships on my end has been either through a community-based organization, through different associations, and working really closely with the people that track our students as they're on SUNY.
Yeah, and Meylin does a lot of very broad work and very specific work at times too for different students and involving different campuses in this whole entire network at SUNY. And I'm always glad to be a part of those opportunities. And that again is part of this whole initiative and being more forward facing and accessible here. And also then being in tune with what is going to be needed down the line. We briefly touched on the affordability factor. I think SUNY is a great value, but is for a lot of students, it's not the initial best value. It may be a good option, but in terms of full on costs, particularly at-risk students, it's a jump for a residential college. It's a massive jump. And that first year funding might be there. The support will be there. Your Pell and TAP and other grants, institution grants help. But what happens that second year? And for a while, the gap was close enough that it was manageable, but we're noticing it's a more expensive SUNY here, that it's starting to creep in more, where that retention is also, the retention rate is affecting obviously graduation rate, which graduation rate is a thing that catches a lot of people's eyes. So actually talking about retention now more as a graduation rate problem has kicked different offices into gear. How do we cover that gap a little bit better, especially for keeping students who are identified as at risk on campus as long as possible versus saying, hey, we have great off-campus housing that's more affordable. That might not be the best option. So there's deep conversations starting to happen, again, because we're looking at it from a graduation rate standpoint, not just retaining. The retention rate overall is pretty high at Binghamton, but that kind of clouds the data, I would say. Now, the partnerships, again, I know I mentioned this a little earlier, but those CBO partnerships, particularly with success counselors, comes into play big time. There's a handful that we work with, particularly in the New York City area, that are much broader networks. Also with that, we're pioneering a few different things with bigger groups, like an organization called Give Back, which identifies students in high school where parents are incarcerated and or very, very low income families or backgrounds, where they join the program sophomore year in high school. And it's nationwide in certain states. But we're one of the New York options right now, and that will grow over the years. But once these students get to Binghamton, they already have built in a pipeline of success coaches that they will have going into college, but they have, they're guaranteed a scholarship to go for free. Those are smaller programs, but seeing how they work could help give us some ideas on how we could do a broader rollout campus-wide for more students.
Yes, and I just wanted to add, Marissa, really quickly that we have a Foster Youth Care Success Alliance initiative that matches CUNY and pretty much offers additional funds. The amount last year was about $10,000. We're not sure for the upcoming year, but students that have been in foster care are given additional money to help with housing, tutoring, transportation, academic resources. And this is money that is not if they don't identify as having been in foster care through the application process, they're given the money once they're enrolled out of school. So that I want everyone to know that there's a lot of money or different grants or funding available that students are not even aware of completely. So it's sort of our job to be as well informed as we can to guide them through the recruitment and then the retention piece after they're out of campus.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely some great resources and supports for them. So I don't know if Shelitha and Karen, you have anything to add about that.
I wanted to add that it's really important to, obviously, we want to recruit student and retain student in a human way. When people start talking about data, then you start thinking about, okay, now we're doing with numbers and not students. But I think it's really important that we all understand the big umbrella of higher ed and the big umbrella of recruitment and retention is to figure it out way before they come on campus, way before they are online, because let's talk a little bit about the modality online. I know people are itching out there to talk about what's happening right now, about how we are all switching over to online and what's happening in this moment of crisis, and how we're going to keep everybody engaged, connected, and how we're going to create support systems that could also work online. And I was ready to kind of share some information about that because I'm in the middle of actually taking my entire advising, my entire tutoring system and my entire library system into online fully within the next 24 hours. And so we are managing to do that. We're trying to manage that. But what in reality, the human part of it is connecting who you think you already have as a profile. Are we really understanding the profile of the student that it's coming from? And are we really being true to knowing not only that they're at risk, we want to talk about who has the risk. Well, guess what? Every single student has a risk, okay? A student might show you that they academically have some IQ, but might emotionally not have the IQ. So those are the things that actually is very embedded into who's at risk and who's not at risk. I think every single student has an area that they need to develop and that is underdeveloped. And if we are tracking who they are, where they're coming from, we still need to understand not only their race or their ethnicity or whether they're first year generation, we still need to understand what is their grit. The grit of being able to spend 2 or 4 years, depends on how long your institution is. But if it's 2 years like mine, I still want them to do 4 years, right? I still want them to transfer, right? I still want them to. So those are the things that we are missing from the beginning. And we as institutions have to be actually now even more careful, because we might be losing that human contact when all of this crisis right now, we're all switching online and we're trying to now figure out who, what, and where. We don't even know how recruitment is going to look like next year. We don't even know how retention is going to look like next year, because we're trying to figure out what's going on right now. And we're trying to retain whoever we have right now online, which is a major crisis. And so techniques for that will be within the traditional technology and within the technology that we are used to, quote unquote, to use for online modalities, because we do know that there is institutions out there that have mastered online, but they still have hiccups. They still have challenges. Even when they're online, there is still challenges. at this point, the paradigm is shifting, and we might be shifting how we do recruitment and retention for the next 3 years right now based on what is happening to us. And so what techniques and what's happening, it's really important. And not only doing Zoom, I mean, a lot of people are probably hungry out there trying to figure it out. Can you guys give us best practice? Well, none of us can figure it out right now. So it's not that I want to burst everybody's bubble out there, but that we are not going to, the panelists today are not going to come up with solutions, but we're going to come up with situations and what's happening before and what might be happening after this crisis, and then learn from each other. But know that we still need to have a profile of students that we need to follow. Know that we still need to engage them somehow and make them connect and make them from the beginning that they are connected to the institution and that they belong to the institution.
Thank you. Yeah, that's, oh, Shelitha, go ahead.
No, Ahmed, I was going to say it's no longer about the student being ready. It's about the institution's readiness for the students. We have to meet the students where they are. We need to serve them in the way that they need to be served and be flexible in doing so. And so we are being challenged at this time. You know, we are all in this circumstance. It is beneficial that we're all in it together. So we are learning and we're supporting each other, and it's not a competitive nature. We're truly supporting each other. And I believe that there's benefit in that. But we need to ready ourselves for who's coming in the door and meeting them where they are. Even as we talk about online services and delivery of curriculum, are our students prepared? Yes, they have a cell phone, but that does not mean that they can do all that's necessary to be successful in an online environment, and we have to keep that in the back of our minds as we move forward.
Definitely. And I think now that we are on the topic, I think we should go into the chat and see what types of questions we have here. Karen had asked, and I believe our Karen here had answered that question, but just addressing system and process changes they are now considering in light of the current remote online student situation. I don't know if Craig or anyone else has something to add to that.
Craig, well, the only thing I wanted to add right now that's relevant is the extension deadline for the deposit deadline for May 1st. So that's been up in the air. Some campuses, a memo did go out from the provost's office today. SUNY Genesee is one of the campuses that has extended it to June 1st. As far as state operated campuses, they've also had it case by case, but we envision that campuses will extend the deadline. And as far as SATs were also canceled. So I think it's just being up to date with the changes as far as the extension deadlines, SATs being canceled. How are we re-engaging our students right now, because they're not going to be left alone. So Craig and I will probably do a lot of video calls with counselors and students and keep them up to date. But the counseling community is in a panic because they want to make sure that their student are given the best support to complete their applications during this time, because as we talk about at risk, in many student situations, they're applying later. So the applications at this time would be the peak of them completing this for SUNY campuses. So I think just being up to date, but the deadline for now will probably be extended for many other campuses. I don't know if Craig wants to add anything.
Yeah, it's an ongoing discussion. And as things stand, like the big deadline of depositing by May 1, and for many of our students that we're talking about in this population aren't necessarily depositing because they don't have to deposit under a certain threshold, but we're still honoring that May 1 in part to decrease the amount of confusion and try to establish some level of normalcy in this process. I realize I'm saying this talking about a situation that's ever changing and ever growing. So that means the answers to these will be ever changing and ever growing. And there's somewhat of an organic approach to this, and not saying wait and see, but as we get closer, what can we do to be more flexible versus making a decision about we'll move to June 1. Well, what does June 1 really entail? But at the same time, trying to make sure we have our ears listening to what's going on, and then also trying to make adjustments as we go. I think there's going to be a shift for this year's, I say, let's talk about the juniors in high school or even sophomores that are, you're really trying to get prepared to get to the next level. They're going to have a big change in grades, in preparation. Even if they're able to take standardized exams later in their high school year, there'll be a big setback, and we don't know what that actually looks like. So I think, for a lot of the schools out there, they don't arbitrarily set their standards. This is what we need in order for you to get in. It's based on what kind of is presented in the application pool. There will be changes, but I think many of these changes will happen in a natural flow for that year. So those things are all going to be looked at. I think it's going to be taken into account. I'm not even quite sure what our fall recruitment plan might even look like now. Are we in a situation that's somewhat similar to what we are in now? For many of our institutions here, 1 year of, or not even, I would say even a spring season of not meeting with students, the name of your school may just drop off their entire list. So while we try to do everything virtually, not every student can tune in virtually, but maybe shrink our audience a bit and make sure we're staying in contact with the counselors as best we can to make sure they understand what we're doing and what we're here to help them with. Even if it's for this year's seniors, that goes a long way for the next year, or this year's juniors that will be next year's seniors. So trying to shrink the audience to make it a little less confusing, hoping that will then transmit back out by the time we get to a clearer space and time.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that Karen had mentioned, we're not going to have all of the answers because everything is changing. And so any sort of resources and things that you all can give today are very helpful. There was another question here. Do the same supports apply to students at the extension centers?
Well, if I can talk for Hudson Valley, I'm not sure what students, what services they're talking about, but in my case, at my institution, we have the same services as for all students, part-time, full-time, online, on campus, off campus. Everybody gets the same support. At Hudson Valley, we have something very unique. We have a learning commons that is huge. It's approximately 60-something staff members, full-time, part-time, that are faculty, full-time faculty, doing a writing and research center, doing a math center, doing a computer learning center, and business center, and science center, studies labs. And so what we're trying to do actually right now is to put all that online through Zoom, through email, through whatever we can imagine, any methodology that you can imagine. We are trying to connect with students to make sure that we achieve that, but it's open to everyone. And I think every institution should aim for that. I don't think every institution should just only, I believe in special populations, I believe on target students, and I believe that some of us have grants that are only for specific students. But as an institution, I'm aiming to get that for everyone, and everybody gets the same student support services. And that's very intentional for retention. I wanted to mention something that a lot of people tend to forget, which is faculty and faculty and modality of teaching, because I know we're talking about recruitment, but retention, I am obsessed with including faculty and retention. Whether you're online or whether you're in the classroom, the first 20 minutes of that contact with that faculty is going to make it or break it with the student engagement and the student willingness to be connected to the institution, not the faculty, not the class, not the course, not the department, the institution. And this situation that we're going through right now is totally going to change the way we teach, the way we do learning outcomes, the way we test students, quiz students, or ask students to prove them that they learn what we taught them. And so I am actually nudging institutions and leaders and faculty out there to really think about how flexible, because we need to be more than flexible. We need to be very creative in any kind of modality and mixing them in recruitment, in retention, in the classroom, outside of the classroom, online, and you have to mix them. You can't just do a cookie cutter in one class of 20 students or 25 students. You are going to have, from recruitment to retention, online and offline, different modalities. And if you're, as a faculty member, as an administrator, or as a counselor, if you're not flexible enough, we are not going to survive as an institution.
Very good points.
To add, Marissa, I think also collaboration. I think this difficult and challenging time is going to force us. I come from, you know, everyone is in silos most times, right? Working on their campuses. And I think not everyone, due to nature of their jobs, not intentionally, but may focus on their work, their purposes, their goals, their outcomes, and their staff. And considering that for me to be at the table with EOP directors and chief diversity officers or directors of admissions, I think the key to success is collaboration, because I think recruitment and retention and diversity is everyone's job. Like Karen said, I don't think it should be all falling on admissions or retention. That's why I think I see people like Dr. Williams such an interesting role, because she's a CDO and she also looks at student success, right, and engagement. So there is a lot of overlap that we have to come to. I mean, a perfect dream world I would love to have, which some campuses do, you know, like is a retention team where they have a committee on campuses that focus completely on retention for their students. Because like Karen says, there's no way that one model is going to help every single student at the campus. So I think we have to be very mindful of what that means in the long run.
Thank you. And I'm trying to get to everyone's questions, and Shelitha has been very nice to respond to some of them in the chat. I think we got to all of them, unless I am missing some. Let's just, there was a question. I have several students who work full-time hours or close to full-time in order to help their parents financially. They are also full-time students. Most struggle with balancing both and do poorly academically. Any suggestions? And Shelitha, you had responded to that person, so you can see her response in the chat. Are there supports also available for part-time students as well? I believe that question was answered, right?
Marisa, if I could add to that question about students that work full-time, that are in the, like Meylin said, on the workforce and on school at the same time. I can't sit here as an administrator and not think that that's part of what the institutions have to change, that traditional mentality that you need to be sitting in the classroom, or in this case, yeah, there is some online institutions that you need to be sitting in the computer and but we need to go back to that piece that we have missed for a long time, which is using the students' work and work credentials and experiences and previous learning experiences, and having the ability as an institution to use those credentials to provide some credits to the students. We need to break that mold of that traditional academia, and we need to go into the documenting the workforce experience of the student, documenting trainings of the students, documenting things, and being able to do it well. I'm not saying free for all. I'm not sitting here saying, yeah, just fill out a paper and tell me what you've done for the last 2 years and you work for a company, blah, 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 blah. No, that's not what I'm saying. We should be able to, the same way we develop curriculum, which we do pretty well, develop ways of how to use student learning experience, student community work to provide students with that extra push to document their learning experience and to document that they had a learning outcome out of that. And that is a piece that we need to strive for the next 10 years in higher ed if we are going to survive the low amount of high school students that we have to compete now, and the students who are struggling and juggling with their lives, and that we are not a priority because they need to prioritize their life. And any higher ed institution is not going to take that over.
Mhm.
Strongly agreed on this, yes.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, there was one question that we haven't gotten to yet about NACAC. And so Meylin just wanted to clarify. And Manar, are you talking about the code of ethics? We'll give her a second. I'm glad, Manar, you could join us. Manar attended our winter leadership retreat for sale, so it's good to see her on the webinar.
Yes, hi. I wasn't sure you're seeing what I wrote because I didn't finish it yet.
Oh, okay, yes. Yep.
But yeah, I'm talking about the code of ethics and the code of admission and the competition worry about like the May 1st deadline. And
Sure. I mean, I have Craig on the line. So I'm actually on the executive board for New York State ACAC. So for the state association, we're underneath NACAC. And because of the Department of Justice investigation, we don't currently have a code of ethics, which to clarify for everyone on the call, for the code of ethics was the recruitment purposes, to be very mindful to not give out free items, like to not be in front of a table during a college fair, to not poach other students, like once they've been accepted to other campuses, things that we want to follow sort of as a protocol, as a system among campuses, not just at SUNY, but CUNY and other campuses and other colleges as well. Unfortunately, with that being removed, we at SUNY system have sent a mission statement from, it's our VP of Dr. Nestler of strategy that I can send out after the meeting, just saying to abide by the guidelines, even though we don't have them anymore as of right now. Unfortunately, we can't speak for everyone, right? So we cannot mandate that campuses sort of don't do those things. There has been situations that things have happened in general. So I think we're very careful, but the code of ethics being removed does make it more difficult, especially as we're a decline in enrollment and people are struggling to meet their classes. So that means that people will be doing different things or offering scholarships if they have more funding. There will be an interesting dynamics of campuses that have the ability to offer more things to students to kind of entice them to go to their campus. Craig, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's just a scary time, but also an interesting time, because while this fall became a discussion point, just campus wide, how do you plan ahead for maybe a very kind of flexible May 1 to June 1 timeframe where there's like an outright competition maybe going on for similar students, which is kind of one thought that was happening. Maybe didn't happen that way, and that would be a great thing. But now we have, I think, what is a bigger change of scope and change of field right now, with not only that in existence, where it's a lot different than years past, less predictable is
right.
One way of looking at it. Now with a whole nother big situation going on that we don't know. So with all those sort of influences on the scope of recruitment, it's very hard to say what will happen. I know for many years now, and we're talking 10 plus years, particularly the selective colleges out there have been managing wait lists, like admitting students to a wait list to manage that. I would imagine that's going to be the case, if not broader than ever before. And in some cases, this might actually help students who their top choice didn't admit them, but they're more likely to admit them soon after a certain arbitrary deadline in the sand. So there could be some benefits to students in this process just because of all the unknowns, but it's going to take time to figure out.
Thank you. And another question, would SUNY be able to change financial aid packages to recruit or keep students?
I will say that a lot of memos have gone out for reimbursements. So students who have been asked to leave the campuses as far as credit, I don't know if campuses want to talk on that. I've seen a memo. So they are talking about the students who are currently leaving campuses and what that means for them financially, not being on the campus anymore. But I'm looking in the future, that's going to also be a case by case and change.
And from the recruitment side, I mean, that's highly up to each individual institution. They're able to use institutional funds to then recruit students. And I think each college makes their own choice on that. Some use it quite readily and others don't. And frankly, it's whether you maybe have the money to do that or not. And oftentimes it's not coming from the state, but coming from, you know, foundation sources or outside of the state funding, which is coming through tuition.
Thank you. So in our last 5 minutes together, does anyone have a burning question that they would like to ask the panelists? And you can type it in the chat. I know we talked about a lot today, and I appreciate all of the conversation within the chat. I guess if no one has any burning questions, I'll just ask Karen and Shelitha, what are some final thoughts you have for the audience?
I would say, as it relates to recruitment and retention, it's important for us to be creative problem solvers. I think that we do need to collaborate. There is strength in joining the expertise in different areas to assist students in choosing, making the best selection that's best for them, but also being able to get past some of the hurdles that we sometimes put in their place, to be quite honest and direct. I think that it is important that we evaluate our processes so that we are supporting student success and not getting in the way of their success, which sometimes unintentionally does occur. In this time of uncertainty, I think it's important for us to recognize that students may not, we can't make the assumptions. Students, all students, that has to be thrown out. We have to really individualize how we meet them, whether it is prior learning assessment or it is how we manage their schedules. We can't do uniform anymore. It's really about individualized learning plans and supporting students in what they deem as their success. Oftentimes it's strictly commencement and graduation. That's not everyone's journey, and being flexible and recognizing that, I think, is very important.
Great, thank you.
I would then add that it's important that you go back to your institutions and you ask the right questions. You want to go back to your institutions and really collaborate and encourage, whether it's through your supervisor, whether it is through your unit, through your dean, in terms of more collaboration and training for faculty of how to use different methodologies in the classroom. This is really important. Telling your supervisors that faculty and staff need more training on how to develop different methodologies and how to meet the student where they at, and not just use one form. If you don't have this form, then I'm not going to do anything. I understand regulations from financial aid. I understand regulations from admissions. I get it. But there are certain things that we all know that when we go back to assess our institution, there are issues and modalities and practices that were created within the institution. Those are the ones that you want to question, because those are the ones that are going to impede your recruitment and your retention. There's probably somehow a window that somebody closed because 10 years ago somebody created a policy and it belongs to the institution, and why, how, and where. Well, if it's not federally mandated or state mandated, why are we doing it? That's usually my question, not only to my staff, but to my colleagues. Why, how, and where? Sometimes it does make sense because of a specific situation on campus. But in this stage of age, I think right now, based on what we're going through, we need to put all of those make-up procedures or rules that are not connected to some kind of regulation to open the recruitment and to open the retention. Okay, I understand that some institutions for years have some selective guidelines and some, but that might take you to a different level. That might take you to a different situation, and you need to go back and probably do that. And so I am inviting everybody to go back to campus and really question that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. So I just wanted to give some contact information up on the screen for all of our panelists. We really appreciate your time today and for the audience to join us, and we hope that you got a lot out of it today. Upcoming webinar topics, very timely for these. April, we're focusing on emergency preparedness, and May is supporting the mental health of campus professionals. So please tune in to that. You can go to our website and register for those. Thank you all. I really appreciate it. And we're in this together, so thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Bye, everyone. Be safe and be well.
Thank you, everybody, too, as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye, everybody.